All right, what's going on, everyone? As you start to join us live here, looking forwad to today's. I got double live on LinkedIn today, and then we've got all my folks joining on Zoom. My name is Scaled today, Scaled, aka Jake Dunlap. You can call me either one. It works, So we'll figure that part out. So really excited for the conversation today, everyone. I know coming into 2024, Outbound. I don't know how to put it. I mean, is Outbound under assault? I mean, I think Outbound's been under assault for a few years, meaning just like it's not really like people are missing numbers left and right. And that's a mix of like unrealistic expectations, probably, and other things. But I will say, I think this year coming into this year is probably I would say like the most, I mean, maybe the word's pessimistic or just unsure that I think I've seen a lot of people, about Outbound and how to hit Outbound numbers and things like that. So, I think today's conversation is going to be really helpful. And please, everyone, you join me in welcoming Mr. Anthony Nava. Anthony is the SDR manager at Crunchbase. So most of you probably guys use Crunchbase for your outbound, right? And if you don't, you can reach Anthony at Crunchbase. I don't know what the email address is, but I know we use Crunchbase and lots of our clients use it as well. I mean, anybody, if you're selling into technology or, a lot of different industries, like their data is, top notch. So there you go. All right. Reach out to Anthony if you're not. Anthony, man, thanks for joining me on this conversation. For someone, I run a consulting firm, but I like to think of myself as a practitioner first. I think I am. I don't like to think about it. I think I am a practitioner. I'm still out there, running sales calls, trying to make shit happen. So it's, I'm not just sitting back in the ivory throne, just consulting 24/7, although that does sound kind of nice to just like pontificate and give advice. But we got a good crew rolling in. Let's see. We've got some account directors, VPs of sales, BDRs, commercial AEs. What's going on, Michelle? She's joining here from Austin. What's up? I'm also in Austin. Anthony, where are you? Are you in the Bay?
Yeah, Bay Area, Oakland, California, to be specific.
All right. You have to call it Oaktown, though. It'd be like
The
Oaktown.
town, the
Oaktown in
town,
the house.
510.
That's right, man. I remember when I was a kid, we used to have there's this thing, for those of you who don't know, it's called Columbia House. And they would ship you like literally you could be 10 years old and they would like ship you CDs. Like they just ship them to you for free. Like, and I think that they didn't know that you were 10. And I would get like E40, Too Short, like all this stuff. And I like, where are my parents during this? Like as a part of that? Like I really don't know where my parents were as a part of that piece. But if anyone who's like mid to late 30s or older, you know what Columbia House is, as a part of that. And then there was a group, it was E40, it wasn't Spinderella, it was this other woman. They had this song, Hurricane. I just remember that one. It's like
Oh,
Hurricane.
Hurricane.
Yeah, there you go, man. So that's what's up.
I kind of,
That's my representation of Oaktown. I just remember riding around in the suburbs of Kansas City, just bumping Too Short. Like I had any clue what he was actually talking about. Right. Like that's one of my favorite things. Like me and my best friend from high school will look back like, dude, do you know the shit we were saying? Like back in the late 90s? Like that was not appropriate in retrospect. But
I like to call those songs we had no business singing at the time. I have a whole
no
series on
business.
that.
I lived in a suburb of Kansas City. You know what I mean? I had no clue what was going on, but I thought I did. I definitely thought I did. So anyway, you can hear us talk about Oakland rap all you want, but we're also going to spend some time talking about Outbound and the future of Outbound. Jeff, Casey for the win. Chiefs got a big playoff game. It's going to be 0 degrees in Kansas City with 20-mile-an-hour winds. Welcome, Miami. I am pumped. That's the exact type of game we need for Tua and the boys to come into town. So anyway, all right. Now I promise we will get back. People thought the KC, they know that's my, that's what I represent. So, all right, everybody, let's talk Outbound. So Anthony, I want to jump into it. We got like 35 minutes or so. So we can, I think we got a lot of times. Also, just know I will be monitoring. Becca will be monitoring LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, I always encourage everyone to be selfish in these conversations. Meaning, if we talk about something and you're like, Jake, can you guys double click on that? Can you tell me a little bit more about what this means versus that means? Or, hey, Anthony, can you elaborate? Or if you just have a question about Outbound in general, please drop that in the chat. Becca will monitor on LinkedIn. I'll be monitoring on the Zoom. We got about 45 plus people on the Zoom. I think we got another like 40 plus on LinkedIn. So, all right, man, without further ado, I like to loosen things up a little bit, just jump straight to the business there. So let's talk about, one of the topics, obviously for today is like mastering the pivot, how teams can start to, kind of hit their numbers or master, any type of pivot that their business is going in. And I think a lot of people are through that. Can you share a story where like the data was a part of like your decision making? Because let me tell you why. I really feel like most outbound and B2B, many B2B decisions are based on gut. This worked at my old company and I'm going to do this now. And this best practice worked in 2018, so I'm going to keep running it back. So maybe talk a little bit about how your team, like how you leverage data in particular, because this is definitely an important point for me to make sure that you're making smart decisions in terms of who you're targeting and then the messaging.
Definitely. I'd love to even hear from the chat. Like, when's the last time any of you analyzed like your ICP recently, and that's based off of your closed one? If you have, mention in the chat. If you haven't, happy to talk a little bit more about how we've done that. So there's a couple of ways that the team and I go through revisiting what's our best outbound strategy and ICP. The first way that we like to do that is analyzing our closed one over the quarter and seeing from our ICP points, personas, and industries what has changed. And we like to also sort that by largest deal sizes and quickest sales cycles. The reason why that's important is because you'll be surprised to see how much the industry and how much personas have changed in some of those data points. One example of that, we've noticed that in some of our deals that have closed the quickest, generally that had to do with either someone from finance or procurement being involved in those transactions.
Yeah.
So whether it was impacting our sales outbound strategy to start including them earlier on in the sales cycle, or just reaching out to them directly, looking at that data and seeing that these were some of our most successful deals closing at the quickest times, it was due to the fact that our persona wasn't typically a salesperson. And as a matter of fact, it didn't matter if it was a CRO. It was, in fact, someone from the finance team or procurement team whose sole job now is to help budget and consolidate tools versus just merely signing something off and adding that to the small budget that some companies don't even have the luxury of seeing.
Yep. Yep. And then how do you think about like leveraging that data? Or maybe like what are some like typical insights or some things that, whether it's like overlooked data points, and what that can do to kind of help to generate more outbound or trends that you're seeing in terms of like, hey, consistently, here's like some areas to look. Again, whether it's people are overlooking it or not giving it enough merit. Are there any areas you've seen that are kind of hidden in plain sight?
One thing that I think a lot of people are overlooking when it comes to data points that can help them expand their outbound is one of the ways that we do this is looking at tools or ways that people can help identify companies that are ready to buy. A lot of people hear this, but a lot of people don't really look at some of those data points. And I think the two key things that really identify what's a good company to prioritize or reach out to is going to be something related to either recently receiving funding or hiring signals. A lot of reps, most of the time, will have 400 accounts that they're looking through, and they're not prioritizing those accounts by those signals. That's one thing that I really encourage reps to help make sure that their shots count and they're not spinning their wheels looking through people that they're spending a lot of time personalizing and not responding well to, versus people will have their hands raised once they've seen signals such as hiring and funding.
Yeah. So hiring and funding for you all. And I think really for anybody, these type of, we call them like X factors. So when we're working with our client base, um, what we're trying to do is say, okay, for your type of buyer, what are things that would signal, okay, there could be an intent level there, right? And, again, for, you're selling into, tech companies, it definitely, right? You sell a product that, helps people to professionalize part of their operations. Well, that's something, so when someone's going from series, B to C, that's important. So you need to get in front of them when they're in series A, and, kind of plant the seeds, etc. So I think not enough companies. I started this kind of concept of the X factor at Glassdoor, 10 plus years ago, where it was like, okay, everyone always, I feel like, Anthony, they start with like employee size, annual revenue, you know, call it like I call them firmographics data, but there's always an X factor, man. There's always like that one or two things that like actually this extra thing is the it is the thing that actually signals intent for our type of buyer. And that's outside of using any of the like, third party intent datas and all that stuff as well too. So I agree 100%. For all of you, like that's a homework item is to think about for you again. Hiring is a great one for a lot of products, right? Even think about us as a consulting firm, right? Where we augment revenue operations teams and different parts of people's organization and do project work. So if somebody's hiring their first VP of RevOps, that's a pretty good signal for us, right? It could be that or their first director of RevOps that they need strategy there. They might be a good fit. So that's a really, really great one. And obviously funding is a money one for a lot of people. Let's talk about like tough markets, right? A lot of people right now are navigating difficult markets where, like you said, you talked about consolidation. I'm sure your SDR team is hearing it left and right, like, hey, oh yeah, well, actually, we're trying to consolidate our tools from Zoom Info or this intent data thing, etc. How do you kind of keep the team moving like through these times? Because I think, look, whether you're an SDR leader or a sales leader, there's just more competition in the market, one. And then again, this concept of more consolidation and everybody kind of getting into everybody's business is also important. How do you lead your team through that? And, and as in, work with your sales counterparts and other leaders, to make sure that people stay positive. You're able to, come up with realistic goals, hit numbers, etc.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is super important when it comes to keeping a team motivated in a lot of these times is really doubling down on the collaboration piece by that. And what I mean is that even though we may have seen fewer wins that we did, a couple of years ago than we are seeing today, there's always some sort of messaging that's working, industry that's responding super well to your value prop. Having your reps identify those in centric channels and places is the best way for you not to only recognize your reps for the hard work that they're putting in. It helps a central location for a lot of your ICs and managers to see, okay, this seems to be something that's working. I can try this email out. I can try reaching out to this persona or maybe dabble into this industry. And it gives them a little bit of a sense of idea and motivation. And one of the ways that I think that's super important to do that for, let's start with SDRs. One channel that we have is messages that led to a meeting, whether it's a
No
really
brainer.
unique
No
personalization
brainer.
piece. Make sure you're doing that. But on top of that, make sure you're recording this. I can't stress enough how playbooks need to be updated, especially in a lot of these difficult times. I mean, you are probably going through, if you're a small company or a lean company, you're going through a lot of tribal knowledge. Your best rep is telling and training
Yes.
your reps, oh, this is what I do, this is how
This
I
is what
see
I do.
success.
Just do what I do.
Just follow me and you'll do great. And that helps out. But once that rep gets promoted, moves on to another company, it's gone. So be sure that you're recording, a playbook you can call your overall playbook to sell during hard times, whatever is the easiest thing for you. Record the messagings that matter and that's seeing success, and make sure that you're giving it a central location and a place that you can keep it so that your reps know where to view it, and your new reps, when you're ready to hire, are going to go through a smoother enablement process.
Man, I cannot preach that enough. And I think the other thing that I'll call out is you mentioned this, which is optimization cycles, and this is it. I talk about this a lot. If you follow my content, you know that I preach this, that a playbook is never done. If you think about, and I'll make how many people are on your team, Anthony? How many SDRs are there?
So currently we have 3 SDRs.
Three SDRs. Okay. All right. So I won't guess. I'm going to just make some guesstimations here. All right. So the issue that I consistently see is that we tend to like do a big push to overhaul our outbound, document whatever, do some new, and then we kind of set it and forget it. And if you're spending $40,000 a month on SDRs or 50,000 or whatever, I always like to compare that to, okay, well, what if your marketing team and department was spending $40,000 a month on Google AdWords? That marketing department, I guarantee you, especially if they're working with like a performance agency, is spending 10 to 20% of that budget to optimize performance. They're looking and saying, hey, we're pumping thousands of data points through this. Okay, let's change the copy. Let's update this. Okay, this is getting clicks, but not conversions. Outbound has got to wake up. We have to start to run our outbound more like a performance part of our organization. And performance optimization is not every 3 months. Every single marketer would fire their agency if they optimized at the same rate that most outbound and SDR teams do, even though the goal is the same. Qualified opportunities. I'm spending $40,000 with Google AdWords, $40,000 on SDRs. Our goal is identical. And so to me, this idea of iteration, instead of, and this is kind of my advice on this, instead of every 6 months or 3 months having big pushes, instead it's about creating, in my book that's coming out, The Innovative Seller, there's a whole, one of the fourth principles called consistent performance optimization. And by just setting up every 2 weeks a review, a 2 to 3 hour review, and 2 to 3 hours of micro changes, your results are going to increase exponentially. And so I think for me, outbound has to move away from the idea that it's like everyone doing their thing. Like, no, this is a performance activity. This is a science experiment. It's like, look, okay, this email has been sent 1,000 times and has a 15% open rate. Like, we got to fix that immediately. We can't sit here and wait for 6 months. And so anyway, just to kind of build on that, like, your playbook, your plays that you're running have to be optimized consistently. Like, I'm telling you right now, the difference between getting a 5% pop every 6 months versus getting 1% better or a 0.5% better every 2 weeks. I'm telling you right now what those results are going to look like, my friends, over the course of the year. So that's my high horse on that, Anthony.
Yeah,
On your
and
point.
and kind of to go off of that too, Jake, like speaking especially about outbound and marketing kind of running in parallel, there's a way that they can work together and helping build both strategies. And one of the ways that we've done that to really help with our outbound strategies is when you can let your SDRs, if they're doing outbound, be in the same room in conversation with your marketing team and
Have to be.
analyze some of the sales leads that they're getting, because while we understand that inbound might be a little bit harder and not as abundant as it used to be before, you'll start kind of seeing some different personas come in and interested in meetings. And at first, a lot of people are super strict. They say, you know what, it's not our ICP, DQ them, not qualified, not going to be working it, versus encouraging them to say, hey, if the company size is decent and the manager or the title is there, have a conversation with them. What we saw when we partnered with the marketing team and analyzed some of our sales accepted leads that were coming in was that our tool is primarily around prospecting, and
Right.
sales teams was generally the one thing that we prioritized. Then we started to see that recruiters were coming in and they still had goals to do too. And prospecting was something that helped out with them. And what that did was that influenced our outbound strategy. And now our reps were targeting a new persona outside of sales. So encourage everyone, when you have the chance, sit down with your marketing team, see some of the similarities or differences you might see from the leads that are coming in. And if you are getting positive results and conversations from that, let that influence and update your outbound strategy.
I love, well, and what you're also talking about too is what I mentioned, and what I feel like is I remember my first leadership role was like the last economic downturn, like late 2000s, right, when like the housing market collapsed, all that, and I was in the job space. I worked at a company called Career Builder, and I was a sales leader there, and I always just instilled in my team, look, we are experimenters, we are scientists, and what we're trying to do is figure out what works and then share and then double down and triple down. And like, there's no, just because this is how we've done it before, if you're seeing success, how do we share? Like, everyone has their own account list. There's no competition here. So, how do we keep that experimentation mindset? And I feel like for me, when times are tough, if your team feels like, man, like we're working together to figure this thing out, working with marketing, working together. All right. I love that Slack channel. Everyone should go do exactly what Anthony's doing, is have a Slack channel where after you book a meeting, you got to drop in place the template that did it, or, and maybe like a quick byline, like this one booked it, but I think they really responded to this other thing. And I think as a leader, for all my leaders out there, are you taking the opposite approach? Are you taking this kind of command and control approach where Nobody has any autonomy. There's no experimentation. It's do what I say. That is why you are failing. And there's a ton of data around, if any of you have ever played trivia at the bar, the teams with 8 people always beat the smart team with 3 people. And there's a reason for that, because you have a diversity of experiences, a diversity of outcomes that different people have experienced. And so you can have rigor in your process and you can have governance, but you have to leave room to for experimentation, and your people will be much more energized. They're much more energized if they're like, dude, this is working. Anthony, why aren't we just spreading this across the team? Like, this is, as opposed to like, nah, this is how we do it. So to me, that's such a big piece. And that actually transitions really well into my next question for you, man, which is engaging and empowering people. How do you balance this? So that's my take on it, of like how you bring in, experimentation and, that kind of scientific method mindset. How do you balance introducing new strategies to your team without overwhelming or creating resistance?
I think it's so important when possible to include your team in a lot of these conversations with like cross-functional departments. Maybe it's the product team, maybe it's the marketing team, heck, maybe it's even like revenue leadership. Having them involved in those conversations, or at least being in the room, lets them at least hear some of the things that are going on, but also allows them to offer feedback and suggestions on things that they're seeing. And sometimes you might not be able to be getting that ability to have your reps doing it. Maybe they're just working overtime, and that hour spent in a meeting is what they need to help qualify leads and whatever it may be. But when I have my reps in the room when these conversations are happening, even if it's just to merely listen, they're at least knowledgeable about some of the things that we're ideating, such as some of the campaigns we're creating, some of the strategies that we're building out, why we're using this messaging. Use that in your one-on-ones to really figure out, how did you feel about this strategy that was mentioned? What were some of your concerns? What would you do to maybe try this differently, or give it your own spin on what you would do to help accomplish this goal? I think taking them in a setting where they're involved in hearing the conversations where a lot of these strategies are happening, and then you listening to their feedback and what it is that might be important to them and ways that they would tackle it, I think help bridge the gap for both of those. So not only are they knowledgeable about what's going on, they also have an ability to impact whether something is maybe going to work or something they're open to, and they're able to have their voice heard on anything that you're looking to bring up to them, so it's not catching them off by surprise, and you can get ahead of what their concerns are if you've already heard what they're mentioning.
Do you let them, I mean, like, let's talk about like the sequences, right, that they use, or cadences. Like, how do you encourage innovation there? I think a lot of managers are, kind of all over the place. You talked about kind of like in these one-to-one settings, but how do you, or like, or even get, tactical, like what you do actually do, like how do you encourage that? Or, what freedoms do your teams have to, try new things, or, bring new things to the table, or, maybe go against the grain if they've got a strategy that's working that might be different?
I always encourage reps to be their own entrepreneurs, whatever their business is. I say a lot of times when I'm talking to my reps, you are the CEO of your business. You own these accounts, your strategies, everything you want to do. I'm giving you the autonomy to try things out and experiment with them. Originally, of course, I'm giving you the playbook. This is what's worked with helped reps before, and that's what our original enablement process goes through. But you also do want to empower them to have the ability to try out new messaging, create sequences, and giving them basically the playground to do that. One of the things that we'd like to do every quarter is taking that best practices that I mentioned earlier about those channels, and then discussing it with the team, saying, okay, now we're going to go ahead and beef up our sequences coming up into the new quarter. What messaging do we think would work great for a first touch? What call scripts did we start seeing more successful meetings created with? Having them share their buy-in, mention what's worked for them, will generally build the foundation for the team. And on top of giving them the autonomy, you might have a lot of reps that'll go send off maybe one-off messaging or creating their own sequences. While it's very important to give them the ability to do that, you as a leader should also be making sure that you're monitoring that data and ensuring that you're setting them up for success. The worst thing you can do is give them the full autonomy, watch them tank, and not at least come in and give them guidance about why they think it's not working at some point. So when I say give them autonomy, make sure you're giving them the ability to do it, but check in once in a while and ask them,
Have
we're
to.
not seeing that success. We're doing that. Why do you think that might be? And then revisit that structure. I think a lot of people tend to just let them go and then the reps fail and they say, whoops. Make sure that you're always checking into to see from their opinion why it's
Well,
not
you gotta.
working.
I think a lot of this, Anthony, is teaching your reps how to do. I mean, again, for some reason, I wasn't. I was good. I loved chemistry. I don't know, like in high school or something. And it was. I just really the idea of a scientific method, which is this idea of you develop hypotheses, you make sure you can track, and you have a control group, and then you are able to track the hypotheses that you had and its impact on whatever it is that you were going to do, and then it worked or didn't, and you make more hypotheses. And I think it's a skill that can really be taught to salespeople about, look, okay, if we're going to do this, how can we set it up in a way that will ensure, one, we can track if it's working or not, we can make additional hypotheses from it based on what we see or don't see, and we can continue to iterate. And so teaching the team to be like, all right, hey, before we start this, do we have the reporting set up to where we can track this? Yes or no? Well, I just want to no. Look, man, if this works, you want to double down and triple down. Let's make sure the reporting gets set up. Okay, great. Now, again, making it like SMART goal. Okay, how will we know if this is working? Right. And again, this is you as a leader being a coach and not telling them. Well, look, if I'm able to increase my meetings this month by 10%, that would be an early indicator. Okay, I can get down with that. All right. So at the 2 week mark and the 4 week mark, let's set up a quick 15 minutes. We'll review the data. We'll see what's working and what's not. Boom. And as I'm telling you, as if you train your team to start to think that way, that great, let's keep experimenting, let's keep doing that, let's make the importance of data. I've talked about this a million times. My friends, reports and dashboards and data entry are for you as a rep just as much as they are for your leader. How can I get better as an SDR or an AE that prospects if I don't know the data? Like for me, how many personalized videos does it take? I don't give a shit about what the mean is that Anthony's team says, on average it takes 50. Forget that. Every person's different. It looks really nice in a little line, but every person needs to know their own metrics. And so, when you start to instill in them this idea of like, you need to measure, your own performance. You need to measure your own, what's working, what's not working, so you can improve. I've just seen a big impact of that, Anthony, that, people like, then they start to think like that about everything. Okay, I got to be able to track this so I can see if it worked or not. And I can make, small changes as a part of that. So for me, that's a big one, as a part of it. And then, look, last but not least here, obviously, I got to talk about, generative AI or other things. And I know that, you all haven't done too much with it, but curious, Anthony, have you all taken a look at Chat GPT? Have you all started to experiment with any use cases there to, help the team, with some of those pivots or with some of the, I don't know, improvements?
Yeah, I would definitely say there's a couple ways that we've used generative AI to help us develop our sales strategies or understand key points. I think the first thing that we've seen it do is that ChatGPT is so good at summarizing large points of data to make
Yes.
it really digestible. If you haven't tried it already, take an article, say, give me some key points here that are going to resonate with maybe this persona or this industry.
Yep.
It'll highlight most of them, or if not all of them for you. What would have taken probably 30 minutes for you to do, prompt spits out in 2 minutes. And how we've applied that to our sales team is our sales calls are recorded. I think someone here mentioned, they're recording their calls.
Oh, it's so
That
good at that, dude. Just dropping a
oh,
transcript in there.
not only is it taking the transcript, now some tools are even summarizing the key points. What was
Yep.
talked about? What were some of the objections? What are the key next steps? And you, as a leader, and even as an IC, you no longer have to go back and listen to a call over again and have to like speak to your manager and try to figure out what was talked about. All of that's summarized. If it's not already doing it through your dialer or whatever you're using to record your calls, take the transcript, put it into Chat GPT, highlight some of the key things you want to understand, and it will give you the results right then and there.
And it's wild how good it is. I can just tell you right now too. And then you can take the results from the key points and say, "Hey, help me to write a 6 sentence email with like 8 bullets." that will highlight to the like to who I met with the key action items and next steps. And then here's what I'll say. You still are going to have to spend like 5 minutes on it. But instead of having to think about all the different things to write, um, again, it's pretty crazy. We're actually building a little custom GPT. It's called transcript analyzer and like output, where basically you all can create your own custom GPTs if you're doing your paid version. And then the custom instructions, this one bot, its whole job is like your job is to analyze and pull together key points from sales meetings. Buyers typically want to understand these three things. Sellers want to understand these three things. So make sure every recap has these things. And, so you can put in the custom instructions. Now you can you can create your own little bot that knows like it's this like excellent, like, you know, email recap generation machine. And it can kind of take things like all the way down, the path. So I think it's a really exciting kind of place for us to be. And as we start to wrap up, Anthony, kind of, obviously make sure you follow along. I think Becca might have dropped it here. We have an AI Unleashed series, myself and Kevin Dorsey. We do it every other week. So we'll be back at it next week on Wednesday. So make sure to sign up for that. Some of the prompts we talked about, etc. We've got that in our Prompt Pro community. So sign up for that stuff. For you and your team, what's working right now? Like, what are the things that for you is, like that you guys are doing a little different? You know what I mean? Like, what are the things that you feel like, hey, this is our, and again, if you work for the competition, put your earmuffs on. But Anthony, what are some things that you guys are doing that you're like, I don't know why every team isn't doing this?
Yeah, I think outside of what I mentioned earlier, when it comes to like prioritizing your accounts based off of funding and hiring signals, I think one of the cool things that we obviously get the advantage of using a tool like Crunchbase is that AI is really steering a lot of the way that people are becoming successful in sales and especially in outbounding. An example of that is before recommendations used to be something where if you were going to get an account recommended to you, you would have to punch in what your ICP was.
Hmm.
And then it got smarter because then the tool started saying, okay, well, based off of these searches that you're doing, we're seeing that you're exporting companies in this industry. So we're going to start recommending you these. Now it's gotten to a point where our reps are plugging in their their meetings created and taking a list of those, plugging that into Crunchbase, or they're taking something as their close one, and then it's going to start being more advanced when it comes to recommending companies and ICPs that you should start prospecting because it'll auto generate a list for you based off of some filters you have, such as we'll use hiring for an example, give you the recommended ones. And our reps don't have to think as much about companies that they spend usually hours prospecting,
Yeah.
export that straight into their CRM, and using generative AI to help really consolidate the messaging now that they figured out this is the company I had to reach out to. Here's an article I know that's going to work really well for them. Chat GPT, help me write a really concise email to this sales VP about why they should buy our sales prospecting tool. And that coupled together is how I feel like a lot of our team is seeing a lot of success in outbounding when outbounding seems to be probably one of the hardest things to do right now.
I love that. Are you guys doing video or any like LinkedIn voice note, anything like that?
Yeah, voice notes, video messaging. I think coupling that a little bit with gifting has tend to see a lot of success when you're doing a lot of unique outbound strategies.
I
That's
like
definitely
that.
something that we're doing.
Yeah, I just think like right now it's just so open. Like video to me, it's just kind of crazy that it never really fully took off. Like it's just so easy to cut through the noise. And if you all don't know LinkedIn, if you're a first degree connection, you can actually send like a one-to-one voice note, which is pretty awesome. But there's a lot of cool things that are out there that people are doing. And I think even what I like about what you talked about, Anthony, is like it's not like a trick. It's more just about getting like specific. And I think what we're seeing more and more is like, guys, if you can just really get to know what your persona like does for a living, like what does a VP of sales at a a fintech company up against versus a HR tech company? Do you know what that difference is? Do you know what the challenges they're facing and the pressures that they have and the difference in pressures between going from Series A to Series C and going from Series C to pre-IPO? And if you don't know those things, you're never going to book meetings. And so I just really encourage everyone, like to me, now is the time of kind of going back to a lot of the basics. But just again, how well do you know your buyers? How well do you know those people? Or are you kind of constantly not, are you constantly just, call it kind of spamming and just saying, "Hey, here's my product," which just doesn't work. So, Anthony, I appreciate you, man. Final thoughts. What's one note you want to send everybody out on around, outbound and things that maybe you're excited about for like the next thing?
I'm gonna leave people with a couple of things to do. First and foremost, if you're not already, partner with your customer team, partner with your sales team, analyze your ICP, see what's closed recently. Does it align, or is there a time to make a pivot? Set a time to analyze that data with them, come up with a strategy. You'll be surprised at some of the way that selling has changed, even for your ICP over time. And the next thing I'm going to recommend to do, try Chat GPT right now. Find a prospect, put in a fun prompt. Jake just put a really good one yesterday about how you can personalize via an article and writing a
Oh yeah.
concise email. Give that a try today.
You
I
can just
don't think
drop
it's going.
links. That's the
Yeah,
lazy part. I can literally drop a link to someone's press release page. I can copy and paste a bunch of their posts from, I mean, literally, I can just drag it down. You don't even have to do the formatting. Like ChatGPT figures it out. And then you can literally say, hey, here, I'm trying to book a meeting with this company, insert link to their About Us, their press release, and copy and paste a bunch of their LinkedIn posts. Here's what my company and product page does solution. What are the top 3 value props and based on trends to a VP of operations? Enter. Dude, it's bonkers, man.
it's so
Bonkers.
intuitive. Sometimes it's long, and I say shorter, friendlier, make it
Yes,
funny, and it'll give you some of the most amazing results. So guarantee you all should be trying that at the end of this call for sure.
I love it. And what I found is like, don't worry. Like it's not the best email writer. It's really good at, I call it snippets. Like if you've got a good like email template framework, drop the snippet in. Like it's really good at like concise value props, but you still have to have a good template around it. Um, and that's what we found a lot of success with. So Anthony, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We had a good crew, 100-something people show up to kind of again talk about this topic, which I know is top of mind. Last but not least, make sure I've got a lot more to talk about this. This might be actually the first time I've talked about it, but my book is coming out with Wiley, Innovative Seller, in April. And so you can pre-order it now, everyone. And we've got a community and you're going to get a whole bunch of perks for pre-ordering the book, for signing up early. You're going to hear a lot from me about this coming up, but we just got the pages live. So go check it out. Everything that we're talking about now, keeping a current go-to-market strategy, optimizing on a consistent basis, personalized sales journeys. The book talks about all of that in the future of sales. So, Anthony, thanks for joining me. Everyone, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you on Tuesday next week.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks, man.